Ba-do-do-do. 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 Do-do-do-do-do. Ba-do.
Is that going to be our new intro song? Alrighty, hello, and welcome back, and my condolences, it's Monday. So, today, January 27th, it is the news for us here at Bamsters, and with me, I have G-Talk.
Hey everybody, how are we today? Yes, newsy bits, I guess. A little bit of roundup on the weekend, probably dominated mostly by Anthem, isn't it?
Well, I'd say probably mostly, yeah. I think for a few hours people forgot about Fallout 76.
Yeah, no. One of my friends tried to play Fallout because he didn't have a VIP key. And every 15 minutes he showed up and complained that the game crashed.
Jeez. Yeah, I kind of figured that Bethesda won't let this go. They'll do something within the next week or two to remind us of Fallout. But, well, alright, first up on the quote-unquote chopping block. Have you heard the warnings about the new Windows 10 upgrade? The 1903 upgrade?
Well, I know there's Windows 10. And I know people should be warned against using it. Beyond that, not much.
Well, I guess in the 1903 update, part of that will basically set aside 7 gigs of your hard drive and reserve it for future updates. So basically, it's going to take a chunk of your hard drive and set it aside. It's not something that you can easily, well, depending on your level of computer knowledge, it may be easy, it may be a little uncomfortable. But basically, there's no menu system in place for you to disable that. They're putting it in place and basically forcing it on users. There is a registry hack that you can do that will disable that. We'll put a link down in the description. And, you know, all the warnings that always come with registry stuff, if you're uncomfortable or not familiar. I mean, the directions are pretty straightforward, but, you know, don't want to play around in areas of the registry if you don't know what you're doing, because you could end up frying your Windows install.
That sounds kind of interesting, because I did a clean Windows 10 install on a virtual machine that I use for some software development stuff. And that took up 20-something gigabyte. Like, literally. Just a clean install. And I've seen computers on sale in stores that have 32 gigabyte of storage space total. Like these really cheap machines. So if a clean install is 20-something, and they want to use another 7, you don't have any disk space left.
Well, and that's the reason why they're doing it. The whole point is for folks who either don't have a lot of disk space or maybe haven't cleaned up their hard drive ever and store everything. Then they run out of space and don't have the ability to receive new Windows updates because there's not enough hard drive space. So I get why they're doing it. I think that the problem here isn't so much that they are doing it. I don't think that there are a ton of people who can't afford to lose 7 gigs of their hard drive for something like this, though I could be wrong. However, it's the way they're doing it that I find problematic. Forcing it on somebody without providing a quick and easy menu option inside the settings area where you can disable it or turn it off. You know, having to go in the registry to actually disable it. That's something I can do easy enough. You know, we've got the instructions. You'll know right where to go to take care of that. But yeah, I don't like it when a company forces something like this on you that should be optional.
Well, it seems like there's a simple solution. Go to ubuntu.com and download Linux, install that, and you're done.
I think the simpler solution is the registry hack, but yeah, you know, to each their own, I guess.
No, but you already had all the headaches with it downgrading pro versions to private versions. It's blue screened and completely even bricked computers. The last few some updates, yeah, through basically 2018, Windows have broken left, right, and center.
And some of those aren't even the worst, to be honest. You know, the one that deleted everything in the documents folder. I mean, I don't typically use the documents folder all that much, but I have from time to time. I usually set up my own set of folders. But yeah, no, that's not cool. But on the note of upgrades, This is something I think you want to talk about a week or two ago, and then it kind of got chopped off there, and so we're putting it back in to cover it again. So how about you lead in with this processor?
Well, it's Bam wants to mention it after you chopped it the last couple of times. So a year and a bit ago, we covered the whole meltdown Spectre things that were hitting, particularly Intel hard, and Intel was doing everything they could to say go somewhere else. And we basically said, you know what, go AMD. Use those. And it's been interesting to follow AMD this last year, because just as Intel has been fighting with those things and trying to make their next CPUs, which they've been struggling with because of physics and technical issues, AMD has come out with their, as we mentioned recently, the Ryzen 3 or the Ryzen 3000s, I should say, the Ryzen 2 chips. And they're coming with Navi, the next GPU, which they haven't revealed yet. But in between all this, there is the stories about, well, the Navi graphics chip and this new Zen 2, Zen 3000 CPU is going into the next, supposedly next Apple's and the next PlayStation 5. And what we're seeing now is that for the PlayStation 5, there is actually a bit of custom silicon, they call it, that has been leaked out online. The product code has been seen somewhere online. And it looks like a bunch of just text, but when you break it down, it actually says, oh, this is a custom system on a chip for Sony, which kind of sounds like a PS5. There's how fast it is, the CPU, the fact that it looks like it will use Navi 10, which is the follow-up to the Vega that we have now, and Polaris that's also still out there, and that it will be a kind of just one chip with everything in it. So it's fun to see that this is coming out online, that it's leaking online, that it's actually happening. They are, in all likelihood, making the PS5 using a, well, in this case actually a Zen Plus, it sounds like, so not even the Zen 2, but with the Navi GPU system, and just custom made by AMD.
See, this almost makes me wonder if we theorize that Microsoft would be possibly looking into the same hardware for the next Xbox, or if we think they'll stick with Intel.
Well, the current Xbox is using AMD.
Oh, is it? Okay, so then they're likely using the new processor.
The current PS3,
as well.
If we take the PS4, the basic PS4 and the basic Xbox One, for whichever reason they still use that, they use pretty much a Polaris GPU and a Jaguar CPU mixed together, and they are also customs. This is where AMD is making their money. Nvidia isn't in this. Nvidia does really nice GPUs, and they just spit out a lot of those. But AMD goes out and says, well, we have all these things we can put together however you want. So Microsoft showed up and said, we'd like a CPU with these specs, with a GPU like this, the whole in one package. Sony showed up and said the same thing. They got more or less identical, but there's differences between them, packages. And then for the PS4 Pro and the Xbox One X, they did the same again, custom of whatever AMD had lying around that they could put together. And this is again what they're looking to do with Apple, with the PS5, and I'll almost guarantee you with the next Xbox.
Well, there you go. You heard it here first. The new processor inside not just the PS5, but the new Xbox.
I think the big kicker on this one is the Navi, because it sounds like it might still be a Zen Plus, which is the current best CPUs, not the ones they announced, but the ones they have actually installed right now. But the Navi chip that'll be in there, if that one will have ray tracing, if they're putting ray tracing into it, then that's going to be the kicker for ray tracing in computer graphics.
Yeah, because at least with the desktop PC cards right now, there isn't much of a reason to upgrade for something like that. I mean, the performance you can get out of a 1080 Ti, it'll be plenty to handle anything that's out there right now.
And the moment you take anything else than the 2080 and you turn on ray tracing, the performance just dies. They keep saying, oh, it can run 60 frames per second. Yeah, if you turn other things down, if you go to a lower resolution. But if you want that really high-end, high-resolution 60 or a higher frame rate, and you turn on ray tracing, you need the biggest, most expensive stuff from NVIDIA. There's not that many games who are going to support that, because there's just not that many people having it. The moment you put it into a console, we're looking at millions who are buying it. Not because they want it, but because it's there. Anyways, to get a little bit away from the technical part, how about some legalese? I know you Americans love your government. Wait, do you have a government?
Oh, okay, so let's go from one topic that will put 1% of the population to sleep to another topic that'll put the entire population to sleep.
Oh, thank you.
Legal stuff. No, sometimes it's interesting. What do you got?
Well, it's just fun because an advocacy group made up of the Open Market Institute, the Color of Change, and the Electronic Privacy Information Center wrote to the American FTC, or Federal Trade Commission, basically requesting that the government intervene in how Facebook operates. People who are old as me or older might remember that the US government at one point tore up Bell, made it into all the baby bells, which then reformed and stuff. But basically, they want that done to Facebook. They want Facebook torn apart because all the data they have and all the data they're leaking, along with WhatsApp and all the other tools that they bought up, basically means that any issues, any privacy issues, any leaks, violations, etc., they just hit so many people. And they also want it a bit as a punishment. You might remember the Cambridge Analytica scandal, where you could basically go to Cambridge Analytica and they would sell you data that they harvested from Facebook.
I do remember a little of that. I know when I first jumped on Facebook, I used it quite a bit, but for years now, I still use it a little bit to keep in contact with friends and family around the country and around the world. But I really don't use it that much anymore. I vaguely remember something about them picking up WhatsApp, and I think they own Instagram now as well, if I remember right.
They claim 2 billion users out of 7.5 on the whole planet. That's a lot.
That is quite a few.
And basically what they can go out and sell, and what companies who can harvest this data and who are being allowed by Facebook to harvest it. Cambridge Analytica actually used official access and then misused it a little bit, but still. They can go in and do things like what color of skin, what kind of religion, what kind of political leaning, what kind of job, what TV, everything you like. They can do that for the individual, and then somebody can basically say, okay, give me 100,000 people who match this description. Okay, and now I can market to them. And that includes things like, give me 100,000 people who might be susceptible to a marketing plan for a presidential campaign for one direction or another. All of a sudden you get data that is extremely valuable and can literally turn an election. That's a problem. You kind of break democracy. But you can use it for everything. You can use it for people are going on Facebook and marketing houses for sale, and then say, oh, by the way, don't include people of color, because this place do not want to sell houses to people of color. High racial discrimination.
That is some real bullshit right there.
And because Facebook still allows it, and because they're actually supposed to have taken steps to avoid it, but haven't, they promised Congress they would, there's reason to punish them, there's reason to deal with them, reason to, as that, split them up, to avoid that all this data gets collected in one place. The big headache is this advocacy group are not wrong, but the FTC, who they ask to break up Facebook, doesn't have the power. The FTC works on behalf of Congress, US Congress, and US Congress do not have the authority to that, only the courts, which means the only way they can get this is to go through a court and go and say, we've been hit, we represent people who've been hit by these leaks and privacy violations, and then sue Facebook. But Facebook has so much money, you won't get anywhere.
Well, you say privacy violation, but when you sign up for an account with Facebook, you're presented with all this information about, data that they collect and whatnot. So is it really a privacy violation? I'm not in any way trying to defend what they're doing. I'm asking.
There are things you can't sign away. There are rights you cannot sign away. No matter what the contracts and agreement says, there are things you cannot sign away. It's the same over here in Europe. The GDPR says these things must be like this. And some of them you cannot sign away. No matter what it says in the contract, they must adhere to it.
Okay.
And you have those as well. And it is a case of, even things where they say, oh, we're not going to sell this data to third parties. They've gone out and sold it to third parties.
Well, in the case of where they say they're not going to do it, but then they end up selling that data, that's also some real bullshit. But
yeah.
So the other thing too that I would ask is, isn't this just, well, in some ways I guess it's providing information that companies might not have had in the past, might not have had access to with regards to like, well, I'd say who specifically might like specific TV shows, because I know they've had things where they could see how many people are watching a specific TV show at a certain time. Weren't there plenty of ways to get this data before? And then also, if they were to be successful some years to come from now and Facebook were to get split up into, multiple companies, wouldn't it just be a matter of going to these multiple companies and still getting the same information?
Yeah, there's questions of aggregate data. In the past, when they collected information on who watched what, good old Nielsen ratings.
Yeah.
They were fairly anonymous, and they were only representational. Like, have you ever heard of the concept being a Nielsen family?
Yeah.
Good. Then those were selected people to represent the demographics. So yeah, they might know that family, but they represent less than 1% of the population. Whereas now, they know the political leaning of perhaps 20 to 30% of the population. You see the difference? It's a scale.
Yeah, they're getting more specific information on individuals versus just an area.
And they can use this more directly when they can tap into everything you chat on WhatsApp and link that straight to you. And that's the same you as every website you visit, and everything else, everything you post on Instagram, everything you do on any Facebook platform, everything you watch on your Oculus is tied into one account. Whereas if it's separate companies, that should be separate accounts. That should be, is that person this person? Do we have a reason to assume that? So running data together from distinct databases is a little bit more difficult than having everything in one database. It's a half step, but it's a valuable half step.
Well, let's move on to something a little more positive then. I had a chance to play the Anthem VIP demo this weekend for a little while. I've got to say, yes, there were a lot of issues with it between the infinite loading screens, some connectivity issues, which I've heard were plenty worse on console. I know the very first day on Friday when they launched, there were a lot of folks, I think especially on console, who couldn't even log in. I had a couple friends who were trying to use the demo, ended up having to call EA support because they would activate they'd get a friend VIP key, they would activate it, and then they couldn't, if they went into the Origin client to launch it, it was like, oh, well, you don't have access to this. And then they go back to their website account, and it's like, oh, you've already activated it. So EA had to do some things with resetting accounts. I think one of the guys I talked to was on the phone for maybe an hour and a half waiting for the EA rep to do a 3-minute fix. So a lot of that was unfortunate. There was a lot of rubber banding with loading issues or getting loaded into an area and then having to catch up to the group only to, through a series of load screens. I'd say missing functionality because we were supposed to be able to pick 2 javelins to play as, but everyone I talked to got dumped into the Ranger javelin to start with again, and then we only were able to unlock 1 other javelin. So at this point, while individuals might have seen 1 additional javelin from prior play if you play the alpha, nobody that I know of actually got to play with 2 different javelins aside from the Ranger.
I know there's been an XP bug. The people didn't get the XP needed to unlock a second javelin, second train. So there's some headaches. But it's also interesting, a lot of people have been whining about, they never have enough servers. But wow, I was reading a thread, I think we reposted that over in the Tweety. just pointing out, look, it's so much more than just the amount of servers. Going from, a test of 500, which is what they probably tested in-house, using, you go out to companies and say, please provide us testers. That's literally a thing. They might get 300, 500 testers, then getting it up to 5,000 in an alpha, then perhaps 50,000 in this open or closed VIP demo thing, or even 100,000. The scale is so much different. The amount of things that can fail, the amount of places things can break, it's just immense.
Yeah, and there's a lot to be said about that. I mean, from what I understand, I think they're using Amazon to host their services.
Yeah, but even that only handles, the Amazon Elastic thing and how it scales. That's only one part of it. There are so many other parts, and that's why these tests are important, because just how a UI thing plays on the server, what the server has to do, might be really cumbersome and might be really slow. So it doesn't matter that you're on Amazon, you have all this CPU time ready. If it is a IO based really heavy process that gets triggered once in a while, and you don't find that until you hit 50 or 100,000 users. So it's fun to read people's complaints when they don't understand how server client system works at scale, because they don't work the way a lot of people seem to think.
Well, and the other thing too is, people are saying, at least in some cases, talking about how they should have been able to plan for all these users, but you can't really, because in something like this where you've got X amount of people who've pre-ordered the game and you're prepping your servers to launch, not all of those people are going to be available to play this weekend. But even if you did plan for every one of those folks, you don't know how many of their friend keys are going to be activated. And even if you could plan that all 3 of those friend keys got activated and every VIP showed up, you still have folks who did like I did. I'd been planning to pre-order the game for a while. I just didn't do so until Friday. So I didn't even order the game till Friday after things had gone live, or right around the time that things were going live. So you might have a bunch of people who were pre-ordering, and of course, you have a bunch of folks who are, all trying to download the client and, pull all that information. But I think, to me, I don't know why they called it a demo. I think they would have been better calling it a beta. The last test they had was an alpha. It was an early build. The stuff that I saw that this was supposed to be like a 6-month-old client, I don't know how accurate that may be, but I think when folks hear demo, you expect a fully functional working product that's limited in some form or another to give you access and an idea of what it's all about. Whereas with a beta, you go in expecting problems and bugs because, it's a beta. It's not a fully functioning product yet.
Yeah, I think they should have gone all out and said, this is a server stress test.
Yeah. Well, that's what most betas are anymore. Most betas are pretty functional with few bugs, and it's just a stress test on the servers to see, to try and handle that load of all these users that they couldn't plan for in-house.
Yeah, and I think one of the things worth noting is, they're using a known engine internally to them, but there's still so much new going on that you can't just plan for X users, because there's so many things, so many layers here that you don't know how it behaves at scale. You can predict it, but you don't know it. And one fails somewhere, like a login process. It looks like there's not enough servers. Everything we hear from BioWare is they had more than enough servers. That's not the headache. The headache was processes that behaved differently than predicted.
Well, and speaking of things that maybe weren't predicted, I heard a rumor this weekend from a trusted source that they were also getting DDoSed.
I didn't hear that because it's your trusted source, of course. But comments I saw was one of those where you read in between lines going, wait, are they being DDoSed? Are they actually being hit from the outside? Because it was just 2 or 3 offhand comments from different people where you can say that there's something they're not saying. And it really sounded like, when you add it all up, wait, they're being DDoSed here.
Which, if by some chance anyone out there was involved in that and happens to hear this, that was a dick move, dude.
Yeah.
So, there's nothing funny or cool about that. But, anyway, a little more positive about the demo itself, because I actually quite enjoyed it. The controls are kind of tricky with regards to flight and then underwater. I was able to get control of flight pretty good. After some practice, I kind of got a handle on that. But man, underwater, I'm still working on that one a little bit. The controls aren't the same between flying and going underwater. Kind of wish that they were, but it gets a lot more sensitive underwater. And the funny thing, the way I've tried to explain it is with regards to flight and underwater to a certain extent, the way that the camera moves, at least with a mouse anyway, is that it feels both sluggish and overly sensitive at the same time. And if you pull too hard, too fast in any one direction, you're going to end up losing control and flying all over the place and trying to correct and overcorrect and recorrect, and it gets nuts. But once you get a handle of it, the game itself becomes a lot more fun. The sense of depth or scale in the world, just wandering around during the free play or doing some of the missions, from as high as you can fly and climb all the way to as low as you can go down into the crevasses and underwater stuff. Like, it's pretty amazing, and the world looks great. Yes, there are still some performance issues that I think that they need to work out, but hopefully over the next couple months, if not couple weeks, we get a build when it's released or shortly thereafter with some performance fixes.
Well, I would say it's a game I'm looking forward to trying sooner or later. Is there an open beta?
You know what? I can't remember. I was focused on this VIP demo that I knew was coming out, and I know if you pre-order it, you can play as early as the 15th, I think it is. But the actual release date for the game, for anybody who didn't pre-order or doesn't pre-order, is the 22nd, if I remember right.
Well, either way, I still have Warframes. I'm good.
Well, and speaking of Warframe, since you do like Warframe, the other Javelin I tried this weekend was the Interceptor. And I had wanted to try the Interceptor in the Storm because I already knew I'd probably play most of my time as a Ranger, and I may or may not spend much time playing as a Colossus, but these other two were unknowns to me. And I'm glad I tried the Interceptor. It's more of a melee-focused type class, I guess. In some respects, I guess I had a buddy of mine compare it to the Rogue class, and it was funny because at first I was like, well, no, but then the more I thought about it, I was like, you know what, he is kind of right. It is kind of like a Rogue class in a way. That's one I think you might enjoy. It's a lot of running around, jumping around, melee combat, but you still have the optional, standing back a little bit and doing some, firing off your guns.
Well, one of the guys said it's like Warframe without the ninjaing. So I guess it's just Destiny.
I would say if it was like Warframe without the ninjaing for him, I would say I don't think he played as the Interceptor.
Well, we're looking forward to it. Those of us that didn't try the VIP demo thingy.
So, all right. Well, we went a little bit long, so we're gonna wrap it up here. Hope you guys have enjoyed. If you stuck with us, if you're listening in on the podcasting client, thank you very much. If you're checking this out on YouTube or Facebook, if you wouldn't mind giving us a thumbs up, like, all that good fun stuff, and share it out, we would greatly appreciate it.
Please clap.